Welcome everyone to day number 2 of the Highway School of Good Roads Week. My name is Joe Wazinski. I'm the Madison County Highway Superintendent and the current president of New York State County Highway Superintendents Association. Let's get started today with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And on behalf of New York State County Highway Superintendents Association, welcome again to the second day of 2021 Highway School, Good Roads Week. This is the 17th consecutive year for me attending the Highway School. I think it has helped me tremendously in my career over the years. So if you are here today, that shows you are interested in learning and finding the tools and resources that will help you in your career. The people and the years of experience that you can tap into here at the Highway School are amazing. And due to some remaining COVID issues, this year's format is a little bit different. But all the information that you would expect to get is all still here, just spread out in a little bit different way, and you don't have to do any travel. I hope you all enjoy the presentations today and the rest of the week. And remember to come back next year. I promise you will talk to someone or learn something new or unexpected every year. And you'll be able to look back many years from now and feel like you made a great decision to participate for all those years. So have a great day, have a great week. Thank you. And now I will turn it over to Amanda for the rest of the show.
Thank you, Joe. Let me just get these set up. Whoops. All right. My name is Amanda Link. I am the event coordinator here at the New York State LTAP Center, Cornell Local Roads Program. Besides working here, I also work as a CrossFit coach here in Cortland County, and I have my master's in adapted physical education. So I wanted to take my knowledge base outside of work and kind of merge it into what I do at work. So Healthy Highway Habits was created. I want you guys to look at this not as like a fitness routine or a nutrition plan, but a way to sprinkle in a little healthy habits here and there throughout the day. So as we learned yesterday from Mark Payne, how to do a truck walk around, we should really do the same things with ourselves. So check in with our hips, our joints, those big muscle groups before getting out to work. You guys work a very strenuous, laborious job. So doing a little bit of stretching before the workday or during the workday or even after the workday is a great idea. So we created this video. It has 8 different stretches that'll hit different body parts. You can do them whenever you like. You can do them sitting in a truck when it's parked or when you're out on the road. So for example, if you're shoveling or you're sitting all day in a tractor, you might want to do some lower back stretches. Or if you're placing cones, you might want to do some shoulder stretches because that's a lot of repetitious behavior with the shoulders. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat pod and I'd love to answer them.
Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to our first segment of Healthy Highway Habits. I know you guys all work a very stressful and strenuous job and trying to balance work life, home life, family life, and now I'm asking you to add physical activity and stretching into your workday and into your life. I know that's a lot, that's a big ask, but I'm gonna give you 8 simple stretching movements that can be done throughout the day. They don't all have to be done at one time for 30 seconds each. You know, sometime in the morning, maybe afternoon, before or after lunch, or even when you get home after work. Nothing crazy. All these stretches can be done. You don't need any equipment. We'll just need a chair and maybe a wall at some point, but that's about it. No dumbbells or barbells needed. Not yet. So the first thing I'm gonna ask you to do is just unclench your jaw. I know we're all staring at the screen, maybe a little tense right now. So just unclench your jaw, take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. The first movement we're gonna do is called shoulder circles. Nice and simple, right? So what we're gonna do is take a deep breath in, shrug our shoulders up, bring them back and around, and do a full circle. One more time. Good, and then we'll go the other way. So bringing the shoulders back first, bringing them up and around. And we'll go back for 3 again. And remembering to breathe as we do this. Breathing is important. And then forward 3 more times. All of these stretches could be done while you're in the office, sitting or standing, or even if you're in a parked truck waiting for your crew to show up. These can be done anywhere at any time. Next, we're gonna go through the head tilt. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna flex your hand. The heel of the hand will bring down towards the ground. You take the opposite hand and guide your neck over to that opposite shoulder. You should feel a nice stretch in the neck. If you don't feel it, move that arm up and down just a little bit, or side to side until you feel it. And we'll switch to the other side, doing the same thing. And we'll go one more each side. Next, we're gonna go chin to chest. I know I'm very creative with the names of these stretches. So, same concept, bringing the chin to the chest, bringing those hands up on top and gently guiding your head down. We're not forcing our head down, we're just gently guiding it. You should feel a stretch in the back of your neck and down either side of your spine. You can always rotate your head side to side, giving that gentle pressure. And then take a second, ease off. Take a deep breath and back out. So, one more time. The next stretch is called the steering wheel stretch. So, you're going to lace your fingers, bring them out, and flip them over. And then you're going to round your back and you're gonna drive them like your hands are a steering wheel. Nice big turns. You should feel a nice stretch in your obliques and down the sides of your back. And like with all these stretches, do it a few times and then relax. Let the blood drain back out and go back into it. These last 4 stretches required a little change of scenery. So the first thing we're going to need is a chair, and you'll also need a wall or something sturdy you can lean up against. So the first stretch we're going to do is going to open up that upper back, and you'll feel it in your hamstrings as well. So with the chair, you can put 2 hands on the chair, have a slight bend in the knee. You're gonna drive your head through. Really feel it in the upper back. Try and keep those arms straight. Then you can stand and release. When you're pushing down on the chair, make sure not to push it back because the chair will flip. You want to push it down and keep most of the weight in your hips and legs. Hold for a few seconds. Stand. We'll do it 2 more times. Hold for a few seconds. And stand. 1 more time. Next movement we're going to do is called shoe the chickens. So you're going to plant your heel, toes are facing up, and take your hands and kind of guide them across the ground. You'll switch legs. So you should feel this in your calves and in your hamstrings. If getting this low is not happening today, that's okay. You can just stand a little higher and do the same movement. Stretching, you can switch it up. How you're feeling. Next thing we're gonna do is the calf stretch. So you can use a step or a wall. You're gonna plant your heel and put your toe up on the step, and then you're gonna lean into it. You'll definitely feel this in the calf. We'll hold for a few seconds and switch. We'll do it one more time on the other side just to even things out. And then the last stretch is a great one if you sit at your desk hunched over. This is going to open up your shoulders. So you're going to find a wall or a post. You're going to plant your palm against it and then turn away from it. So you'll feel a nice stretch in your shoulder and in your chest as well. We'll hold for a few seconds. Switch to the other side. Switching back. And you can always play with the pressure. You don't have to turn all the way. Turn to where you feel a nice stretch and there isn't pain. And we'll do one more just to even things out. I hope you guys enjoyed this segment. I really love doing these things and helping promote wellness and health. If this is something you're interested in, you can always do it like at the beginning of the day when you're having a tailgate talk or right after lunch. Just a couple simple stretches, 5 minutes at most, really helps throughout the day and always helps that posture. If you have any questions about health or wellness or workshops and all that other stuff we provide, you can always shoot me an email or give me a call. I hope you guys have a good rest of your conference and the rest of your day. Thank you for doing this with me. Have a good one.
Hey guys, I hope some of you did a little bit of stretching this morning. If it's not something you're used to doing, it seems a little foreign, but if you do one stretch a day or one stretch in the morning, just something to wake your body up before you get to work, no, it's never a bad idea. So I don't see any questions, but if you have any questions or something pops up along the way, you know where to find me. Go to the CLRP website and search for me. If you have any questions about workshops or anything else, I'm always available to chat. And we're going to turn it over to David Orr in the town of Windham today, doing some crack repair.
Okay, good morning and welcome to Windham. It's a beautiful day out here and we're going to be doing crack repairs. Before I go too far, I'm going to weave back around and you can kind of see we got a crowd here and they're actually paying attention. So for those who don't know me, I'm the director at the New York State LTAP, the Cornell Local Roads program, and we want to thank a whole bunch of people, including Gary Thorington, the town of Windham, for hosting this and finding us our site. The folks here at the Catholic Church, St. Teresa's, who are letting us use their parking lot, and folks from LADA who are helping us, finding us our speakers that we're dealing with today. So we're going to be talking about crack repairs today, and our two speakers are Anthony Simone, who's with Craftco. He's been there for 10 years. I'll let him tell a little bit more about himself in a sec. And Matt Witt with the Gorman Group, who's started, it says here, as a laborer, did with all the dirt and the ugly stuff, but now is a crack seal foreman for the last 3 years. With that, gentlemen, it's all yours.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. First thing we want to start with today is a little bit of work zone safety. The most important thing we have is safety. So when it comes to crack sealing, making sure
Here,
properly.
use that. It's going to have to use that.
All right, hopefully we can hear me now.
A little closer.
One of the most important things we want to talk about today is work zone safety. Coming out to crack seal jobs, making sure everything put out, put down. So making sure don't set up a proper signage, road work ahead, single lane flaggers.
Hold a sec. Got to get our volume. Technology.
Technology is great.
Try it now.
Good speak. Technology.
How are we now?
Go.
All right. So safety first. Again, let's go back to safety and making sure our zones are set up properly. We want to make sure when our guys are out there crack sealing that everything they put down stays down. It starts with signage. It starts with making sure that people coming into a zone know what they're coming into. Making sure you have cones set up, if you have hills or sharp corners, so that people aren't coming around into the fresh material that you put down. You want to make sure that you insure the product you put down, whether it comes from sand that you put on top of it, a DTAC product that comes from other companies, making sure you have water or something to make sure that your temperatures are set so you're not picking and tracking. And if everything's set up properly, your products are put down properly and prepped properly, then you should have a great product. You should make sure that you're preserving your product that you have down, and it should go smoothly. One of the things you want to start with is prep work, and Anthony's going to start with a router.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about preparing cracks. It's going to start with talking about a router, then it's going to talk about the proper tools of cleaning cracks. So first, behind me here, if Dave wants to get a little closer, I'm going to show you what a router is. And the best way to do this is basically show you how it works and what it works. Sometimes people don't understand what a router is. They think of it, maybe it might be a saw, but a pavement cutter actually has wider teeth. So on the bottom here, inside here, you're going to see the cutting teeth. And the reason why I have this up in my truck, the best way to show you how it is and how it works is bringing it up in the air and so you can get right in and see it. So these teeth inside here can be adjusted from 3/8 all the way up to almost 2 inches. These are set at 3/8 right now. And typically when we're routing cracks in New York State, we would do a 5/8 cut on a standard road of any nature. Matt, for example, when would you use a router?
Anytime a state is mandating that something be pre-routed, or anytime you want to make sure that your thin cracks are opened up so you have a proper reservoir for your crack seal to set into.
So one of the purposes of routing is to make crack sealant last longer. And sometimes when we do this, we have new roads that are just paved, maybe 1 year or 2 years old. And between New York City all the way up to Plattsburgh, New York, all the way out to Buffalo, New York, it's cold. We get severe winters. And the thing is our pavement moves with thermal movement. So whether it's spring, whether it's summer, or whether it's winter, our pavement is always moving. So we have new pavement and the cracks aren't very wide yet, but we know we have a lot of thermal movement. We want to be able to get sealant into the ground where it can expand and contract with the movement, the thermal movement that we have during our climate changes. And when we do routing and we open up the reservoirs, what it typically does, it'll extend the life of the crack sealant and keeping that crack sealed up to 70% longer. And sometimes people don't realize that, a cost of 30% more on initially putting it in may make that crack sealant last up to 70% longer. And there's a lot of data on that, and I'm sure you can get that from our website and different locations on the internet. But here is your basic standard router. They also come in 2 different ways. They can also come with a dust control unit as well on them to keep the dust out of the air because of silica. This is just a standard Model 30 router that can be adjusted from 3/8 up to 2 inches. And the next thing we're going to talk to you a little bit about over here.
Before you do that, what about a saw? People sometimes use a saw. When did you do that?
So a lot of times, if you would use a saw, and this actually can be transitioned into a pavement saw, is when you're either routing concrete or you want to saw in joints. So for example, say you had a pavement overlay on top of concrete and those joints underneath there are there. And you want to saw in those joints so you know that movement's going to happen. You want to basically, open the crack before it meanders all over the road so it has a place to move because that existing asphalt or concrete underneath is going to move.
Okay.
So we're going to transition over here to talk about preparing cracks, and Matt's going to basically tell you a little bit about how he would prepare a crack for crack sealing.
So after we've routed or after we've gotten onto a road and we found, the cracks that we're going to be sealing, especially a candidate like this, one of the most important things we have is dry and clean surfaces to apply to. If you have dirt, if you have moisture, if you have oil stains or anything else that's going to prevent a good adhesion, then it's going to be an issue. And again, we're protecting our investments. So we start with a heat lance. This product is air-controlled, propane-fed. It's used to dry and clean the surface. It'll blow air. This chamber will house a burn chamber, and we will be blowing air somewhere around 2,000 roughly degrees, and you should be applying your air directly into your cracks. So you're not burning the outside of your roads. You're just cleaning out and making sure that you have a clean surface inside. Now, heat lances are not always necessary. A lot of times, the tool of choice is just a simple air hose. If you have a good oil water separator in your compressor, and which is
Anthony.
here, if you have a good oil water separator and you just have air itself, air can be applied to the crack to clean out the surface to make sure that you have a good clean crack for adhesion. And it's very important. One of the most important things we do is making sure that our first step is clean and dry.
So there's a lot of misconceptions of when do I use a heat lance and when do I don't. And a lot of times if it's raining, that's not the right time to use a heat lance. And a lot of times you'll see people out there that they might be doing that trying to dry a crack or a road because it's overly wet, and that's not the right time to use a heat lance. If there's dew in the morning or slight moisture because of humidity that happens when you start crack sealing in the morning, that's the main purpose of a heat lance. If the road is too wet for crack sealing, we shouldn't be crack sealing. This is the main purpose is that the dry cracks are already pretty much dry. And you might have that morning dew or afternoon dew in the cracks or in the pavement that we just want to dry to make sure that adhesion level is at its optimal for sealing cracks. And here is a perfect example on the ground of a crack. And this crack here is wide enough where you could or could not route it. It wouldn't matter. But this route here, we could simply hit it with an air compressor line instead of the heat lance because it's very dry out today. If we came back tomorrow and maybe we got some sprinkles today, we might come back in the morning and there might be a little dew or mist on the road that we might need a heat lance. And then heat lance may be something the contractor doesn't use all day. It could just be the first couple hours in the morning. And then the afternoon, they transition over to a heat lance. Next thing we want to do is talk about crack sealing. And again, Matt's been an operator for many, many years. I want him to talk about the do's and don'ts of how you crack seal, what you crack seal, and what you don't want to crack seal. Hopefully you can give us some highlights of what it should be done, how it should look.
Absolutely. So we've touched on safety, we've touched on prep work. Now we're actually getting to the application process. What do you and what don't you seal? We know that we don't seal when there's moisture. We don't seal when there's oil stains or we have any type of overly dirty, sandy roads not prepped properly. When it comes to do's, longitudinal cracks, transverse cracking, great options. And what I mean by that is when you're driving down a road and in your road lane, you have straight cracking, seam cracking, maybe some longitudinals that or some transverse that run perpendicular to your roadways. Great options for crack sealing. There's other classifications of cracks that you guys may or may not have heard of. Alligator cracks. It's exactly how it sounds. It's just like the skin on the back of an alligator. Their pavement has poor surface area, and it's just not a good option because you don't have anything to properly adhere to. You need a reservoir. You need a crack. You need something to stay onto and not a deteriorating pavement. So let's talk a little bit about what we use when we're crack sealing. Anthony, we'll talk about our melter.
Yeah, I will talk about a melter. So traditionally, on job sites, when you see a contractor, this machine could be truck mounted, it could be trailer mounted, as we see here. A lot of times when contractors are using them, they're a lot big, but they can be small, they can be big, and they all do the same thing in the end. They heat material. How's that work? So basically, here is a Crafco Super Shop machine. and it's an oil jacketed tank. So how the material is heated is it's loaded through the loading doors and into the machine, and it's an oil jacketed tank. So this tank on the inside is surrounded with oil, and it's heated by a diesel burner, which if Dave wants to swing around, can you swing around or no?
What do you want to do?
Can you swing over here? I can point out
Sure.
the diesel burner. Okay. So in the front of the machine here, this is where the diesel burner is. This is where the engine is. And basically this burner, it basically heats the material, and it doesn't heat the material directly. And the most important thing with heating material is you don't want to burn it. So this oil bath tank heats the material. Now, when the tank reaches a certain temperature, it'll start agitating the material. And pretty much all machines today are automatic. So when they hit a certain temperature with most crack sealing machines, it's around 270 degrees. They start to agitate and they heat the material. Then once the material gets up to temperature, which could be different for different types of material, two mainly used in New York are a 6690 type 2 and an asphalt fiber material. So the asphalt fiber material may be laid down around 350 degrees, whereas the 6690 type 2 crack sealant would be laid somewhere between 380 and 400 degrees. So polymer modified material. So basically inside this machine, it heats, it agitates, it does all the work basically automatically, and keeps the material at a controlled temperature so it can't be burned, can't be overheated, as long as everything is set properly by the contractor. On the back of the machine here is the application wire, where Matt's going to grab right now. He's going to pull out. I'll come back around over here. So the way these machines work is they've changed over time. Sometimes if you go back 10, 20, 30 years ago, the luxury of hoses like this were non-existent. And nowadays they're electrically heated, and they're very easy for the operator to use. So there's two styles of hose. This is an electric, and the other style is standard. Most contractors out there, they will be crack seal with standard hoses. Others may be using the electric, but it just helps keep that material at a constant temperature. So that way there, when you do apply it, coming out the machine hot, going in the hose hot, and going on the ground hot. Now on the bottom of this, you're going to see an application disc. You can lift it up. So this is we call them hockey pucks, swivel discs. And basically at the end of the day, this swivels with the road and helps play that band on the road nice and thins the road. And it's key to overbanding crack sealing as we're working. We go back 20, 30 years ago, we were using squeegees. And nowadays you can do this just with that simple application of a tip like that. And it basically will run the sealant, flush to the ground for you. The most important thing when you are crack sealing is make sure you have your flow control set so you don't have sealant coming out too fast. You don't want that at all. And the other most important thing is we don't ever want to leave crack sealant high on a roadway. What happens when we leave crack sealant high on a roadway, Matt will tell you, is that
so I'm sure as some of you towns and municipalities know, you are scraping off your carbides. It's never fun. You need to make sure that your application is done properly. And Anthony did a great job talking about that. Making sure that your sealant is in your cracks, not on top of them. You can have a slight overbanding, that's okay, as long as it's a thin surface. And if it's a multi-phase process where you're putting maybe a chip seal or a micro and a cape seal or something different over top of it, then you want to make sure that you're not showing through. And that again goes into back to the application, proper application. So making sure your flow rates are correct, making sure your temperatures are correct. So that's definitely something you want to keep thin.
That's the most important point, and we need to talk about that a little bit more. Is what do you do when you're crack sealing, and when do you want to put pavement treatments back on crack sealing? And a lot of people have that misconception. They don't really understand. When should I put a micro down or chip seal over top of my crack sealant that I just had done, or maybe do I wait a year? What are your recommendations as a contractor when you're doing surface treatments on roadways for application?
So we've seen this in every facet, right? We've seen crack seal, and then a week later, there's a process going over it, and we're upset that the crack seal stuck to our tires, or we're not getting the result we want with maybe something bleeding through. It's all about cure time, making sure that your processes have time to cure. I mean, you're putting a hot applied modified asphalt into a ground. want to make sure that you have time for it to set up. I've seen a lot of municipalities crack seal 1 year and then in the following year, maybe put a surface over top of it. I've seen municipalities in other areas do it the same year, and they've both been successful. But it's making sure that your product has cure time, making sure it has time to set on the ground, and you have good movement in your ground. You want to make sure that your everything's set in there, that it's not going to be coming out, that you have your investment protected.
So over here, starting with the crack preparation, routing, heat lamp, water separators are very important on air compressors or heat lances, because if we're using an air compressor that's truck mounted or machine mounted, we 100% want to make sure we're not flowing moisture back into the crack when we're crack sealing. And a lot of times that happens on a lot of air compressors. They're blowing some type of oil, some type of water residue out of them. We want to make sure everything's equipped with that, so we're not doing more damage before we're crack sealing. Compressor lines and machines to basically apply material. Well, like I said, they may look as small as this, they may look as big as 400 gallons, and or truck mounted units that may hold 1,000 gallons. But in the end, they're heating material at a controlled temperature in an oil jacketed tank, and they're applying it through a heated or a non-heated hose that basically applies the material. And these machines today, they're pretty much automatic. Like I said, they're turnkey, you turn them on. They do everything for you, from agitating the material to tell you when you can turn the pump on to actually crack seal. And I think we hit on almost everything. Dave, is there any questions you had that you wanted to ask us?
Okay, we're going to be starting here with the throwing the catch mic around. So the guys behind me, you're going to get ready to catch here in a minute. We've noticed that the pavement out here has a whole bunch of hairline cracks on it. What would be the treatment for that?
Yeah, so with your hairline cracks, they're not a great candidate for crack seal. When we're looking for, and maybe Dave pan the mic or the camera down a little bit to see, when we're looking at small little hairline cracks like this, it's not, or even here, these are not great candidates for crack sealing. You're going to put it in, you're sealing on, and you're going to mainly set on top of your surface. And we're looking to really get in here. If we have a hairline crack that needs to be sealed, we should be routing it. If we have good longitudinal cracking or transverse cracking, those are much better options where you actually have a reservoir someplace for your crack seal to set into and adhere to make sure that's not being pulled back out.
That's the most important thing, a reservoir for the sealant. If there's no reservoir where you can get in the ground where there's thermal movement, there's no way for that crack sealant to really expand and contract over time to basically keep up with the demand of the thermal movement that happens throughout the year.
So one of the rules that I like to give people, you'll notice I stuck one of my pins in. If you can stick a pin into it and get the whole head of the pin in, it's probably wide enough. If you can't, it's too narrow. And if you need to, you'll have to route it or saw it, but generally that's because it's a moving crack.
Okay. So this one passes the pen test.
What time of year is too hot to hold?
Next question.
So what's a good, oh, that's right, I gotta throw it, I remember to throw this thing. What time of year is a good time of year to do crack repair?
So anytime it's clean and dry and above 40 degrees, that doesn't mean January when it's nice on 2 days when we have salt all over the road. The best rule of thumb I always tell people with crack sealing, especially up here in the Northeast, is we want temperatures above 40 degrees, but we also need the roads to get clean. The misconception is sometimes when we come right out of winter, we get those nice days in springtime, and we want to get right out there and crack seal it. In theory, though, our roads are still covered with salts and chlorides, and we need that to really wash that film coating off the road, because an air compressor and a heat lance sometimes can't get that off good enough. So I always tell people we want 40 degrees, at least a couple rainstorms to clean the road, and then you can get out crack sealing. In the summertime is another time you got to be careful with crack sealing, because if it gets too hot, and you get those pavement temperatures that are very high in July and that time of the year, what can end up happening? Those cracks start to shrink, and they're very tiny because you can't get it because of the heat. The pavement contracts in instead of out when it gets warmer out. But at that point, we can't get any sealant in the cracks. And if you're going to crack seal in the middle of the summer, you better make sure you're routing, because this crack in about 2 months from now may not look the same as it does today, or we might not be able to fit that pen in here come July. So those are things to keep in mind. And then as we get in close to the winter time, October, we're looking for that 40 degrees and keeping salts and chlorides off the road before we call it quits.
Yes, just to piggyback on that slightly, we've all seen maybe the thruway or other areas in New York crack sealing in January. There's a lot of studies that show your cracks are the widest in the wintertime and they're maybe the narrowest in the summertime. So as long as your pavement is 40 degrees and rising, as long as you have a clean surface, again, we're just going back to prep work. Make sure that we're clean, make sure that we're dry, and we'll have a successful application.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is, and by the way, Adam, I'm just going to let you know when it comes time to get the questions off of the Zoom side, throw them in the chat so I can see them. My speaker is turned off, but we got the microphone working.
Okay,
So we
so
have a crowd here behind us. We're going to open it up. They're probably are going to scatter now like people with light. What we're going to do, I'll put it back on these two guys. And we're going to throw the mic out and let people ask a question.
Yeah, good morning, Matt. Anthony, Gary Thornton with the town of Wyndham. My question is, can you guys explain the difference between a traveling crack and maybe a stationary one, on which one I would treat or how I would treat both, or not at all?
Sure. So again, we have upstate New York. We have movement in our ground. We have thermal movement. We have traveling cracks that, they may start small. And I think this is what Gary's referring to. And then the following year, we might have crack sealed, and then maybe it's another 6 feet longer. If you see something that's continuously traveling, expect that your transverse cracks will follow the length of your pavement. So a lot of times, maybe just slightly over sealing the edge of what you currently have here as a transverse crack. As a stationary crack, when you have areas, parking lots maybe especially, that don't move as much, you're not going to see as much traveling inside your cracks. So routing out these and filling them with a nice reservoir may be a great option because it's not a big traveling surface. When you have interstates and roadways that you have heavy traffic on, trucks and things that are really pounding down your pavement, you have a lot of movement in there, and those cracks will travel, and expect to see that. So I hope that answers your question, Gary. Maybe you could follow up on that.
And the most important thing with anything crack-wise that is moving or getting routing is important, especially on new roads. Normally you see those traveling cracks more on newer roads, and routing is more important. Sometimes we forget about it and we don't do it enough. And when we're routing a crack, we build the reservoirs, we take it to the end of the road, if we're routing through a joint or something of that nature. And a lot of times we don't get to our roads back again on those traveling crack roads, the roads that keep cracking, the things that keep happening to them. So that's why do your homework on routing and ask contractors that you work with and see if it's a good option for the roads you're working with, because you may not go back to that road for 5-6 years to crack seal it again. And maybe routing is a good option to keep those cracks sealed longer and over time. That's just an idea. Any other questions?
Morning, guys. Just a quick question. Alan Van Warmer from the town of New Baltimore. How long before or how long after you seal can traffic travel over top of the sealed road?
Yeah, I can take that one. So again, this is going back to our prep work and our work zones and our safety and making sure that we are not tracking, picking, and we don't have any of those issues. If you put a product down, you want it to stay down. And what's your insurance policies on that? Do you spray with water to cool your temperatures to make sure it's set up? Do you apply maybe a DTAC product to it to make sure that the tackiness itself is not taken out? It's all relevant on what type of road you're sealing. If you're on a backcountry road that has a lot of shade, your temperature will cool and hit that point of set much faster than if you're on a wide open interstate road where your traffic has to wait a lot longer. If you have well-trained flaggers and traffic control that know how to check a product, they may just be able to take their foot and slightly step on their crack seal and notice if it has a tacky texture to it or not. And if it does, then that traffic control person or that flagger knows that they can't open traffic up yet, that you have to apply something else to it before you let that go. And it's a fine line that we dance when you get to an intersection. What do you do with a red light? How do you treat it? There's a lot of products out there. Make sure you're doing your homework, and the companies that you have in know exactly how to handle that situation. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, let me take a couple from the Q&A on the Zoom side, and we'll go back to the audience here. First one is, will a chip seal be a good for hairline cracks, or would you just be wasting the polymer because it's not penetrating?
Sure. So we're talking a little bit more about crack sealing today, but yeah, chip seal on a hairline will definitely fill in better than a crack seal because that oil will penetrate in. If you decide to crack seal this hairline and it expands in the wintertime, you can expect that unless you're using a polymerized rubber or some type of material, that's going to open back up again. If you have a chip seal oil that sets in there nicely and your stone has good adhesion to it, then that should create a bond in there. And maybe that answers the question for you.
And if cracks move, you know, no matter what you do, and if it's a newer road with hairline cracks like that, eventually they're going to show through. You're going to have to crack seal. Now, if it's a non-working crack, like you said, you might never see it again. Just things to keep in mind. Make sure you know what you're going over and understand what the road is doing before you put that surface treatment on it.
And again, if the cracks come back, it may be a structural problem underneath, and you want to look at that. We'll do one more here on the Zoom side, and then we're going to open it up here. How deep should the routed or solid reservoir be?
So basically, no matter whatever width is, we're going to go double that in depth. So if we're 5/8 wide, we're going to go 1 inch deep, 3/8, 7/8 deep. So basically, you're always going to be deeper than you are wide. That way you create enough room to basically bridge the cracks. Move.
Anybody here?
John Farrell from the town of Hunter. How do you decide what kind of material to use? Crack. Okay.
That's a great question. Depends what you want as an outcome on the road. Basically, I always tell people, depends what you're doing really. Are you putting a chip seal down? Are you doing a micro surface treatment? Are you paving? When are you doing these applications of that type of nature? If you're crack sealing a brand new road and it's 2 years old and it's 5 years old, you probably want to use a rubberized product. Now, if you're doing something to get fill cracks before a micro surfacing treatment or chip seal, you're probably going to use maybe more of an AC and fiber type product. Depending on what your goals are on that road, you might want a polymerized material underneath it because those cracks are moving so much, and you don't want them to show through whatever you're putting down. And if that's the case, you know, those are some of the ideas I normally go by and what I look for. What do you look for?
Yeah, so Anthony touched well on this. If we have, you know, a working crack or something that's opening and we have a lot of expansion and contraction, yeah, maybe a polymerized material is the best. I mean, OGS has a lot of guidelines and you have to follow those. So you may be using, you know, a 6690, but especially when you're going to some type of overlay, a chip seal or a micro slurry that could show through, the AC is a nice product to use.
And for those who are wondering, we also have in our pavement maintenance workbook that's available, and it's going to magically show up in the chat pod here in just a second, chapter on crack repairs, and it lists these materials and actually has a link to the OGS, so you can go find stuff for that. Okay, what do you got here in the crowd? Anybody else? Brave enough? Nobody's brave enough to catch. I think it's the real issue here. Let me look in the Q&A here. Okay, you talked a little bit about which materials we mentioned earlier and what type use them. Okay, so we did that. Any other questions that we've got here or out in Zoom land? There's no bad questions. We can talk about the equipment. We can zoom back in on something, actually about the heat lamps. Any other questions? Got a quiet crowd here, I'm amazed.
Well, how many more minutes do we have left?
Oh, we got plenty of time.
Why don't we zoom over to the control box of the machine and I can actually explain all the dials. So if one of the towns are on a job site, they can understand what to look like on the panel box.
Okay, I'll do that. And we do have one more question after that. Sure. I apologize for the camera thing here just for a second. I can get that. And let's see here. I'll tell you what. Hold that, Matt.
I got it.
Come on, let go. There we go.
So for the guys that might be out on the job sites as town supervisors or out doing your own crack sealing, what do you look for? How do you set your dials? And what does the inside of the box look like? We can get Dave around here with the camera if this thing is long enough.
It is going to be long enough.
Perfect.
Yay.
So if you're out on a job site or you're looking at one of these machines, there's a lot of stuff going on in one of these boxes, but it's very simple at the same time. So inside here, there's 3 different settings on typically every machine. You're going to have 3 different dials, 3 different readings. One is going to be your material temperature. One is going to be that oil temperature around the tank. And one is going to be your hose temperature. That hose temperature can either be reading the temperature of the heated hose or the temperature of the material on a non-heated hose. The oil here is what we set it for to heat our material up. So typically that's going to be set around 500 to 525 degrees to heat the material. The material temperature here, we would be setting it to about 380, 390 if we were using a 6690 type material. So how's this machine work? I turn the key on, I turn my burner switch on, and then what happens? My burner comes on, my material starts to heat up, my burner light comes on, and then that's the only thing that happens until the material reaches about 270 degrees. Then after that, my mixer will turn on. Once my mixer turns on, that material is going to start spinning in the tank. Why does it do that? It doesn't want to overheat material, and it wants to basically start mixing it up so it can heat faster. And then here you're going to see a pump and the hose, and those are the last 2 things to turn on. They typically turn on around 340 degrees, so that's where you can actually start pumping material if you're using like an AC material or something of that nature. So basically all that is how this panel box works. It looks very intimidating. It looks like there's lots of buttons in here. This here is your pump reverse. So what does that mean? It's basically how I take all the material out of the hose and put it back in the machine. This is an air compressor switch to turn on the air compressor. They'll have switches for lights. Here's your mixer switch, your forward, reverse. So they look a lot more complicated than they are, but if you're coming over and you're on a job site and you're a highway superintendent, you want to make sure the guys are doing the right material temperature. What you would do here is you would look right over here at the material temperature or the hose temperature, and it would tell you the reading of the temperature. You'll be able to know if they're putting down 6690 type 2, it should be 380 degrees. If they're doing something more in the lines of AC and fiber, it would be closer to 340, 350. I'm not sure what you guys normally put it down at, but somewhere around there.
And that piggybacks again on adhesions, making sure that you have the proper temperature and knowing your materials. If you're putting it down too cold, you're going to have issues. If you're putting it down too hot, you're going to have separations. You're going to have issues. So knowing your material and getting it right, and hopefully you guys out here also know, and if you do ever want to check, then you have a little bit of an education on what those numbers mean.
As I was looking at those numbers, I realized that's a really hot number. Hopefully it never happens, but what's the first aid if somebody actually gets sprayed by any of this material accidentally or something happens?
I can take that. I mean, it does happen. This is, as you can see, there's a lot of drippings or splashes that do happen. So first aid and going back to safety and proper PPE is one thing. Making sure you have long pants on, making sure you have shoes on, boots, making sure that you're covered. And it is even recommended that you wear long sleeves, although it's hot a lot of times you don't want to. It's safe. Making sure you have gloves. But if you do get the material on you, you want to cool it. Cool it. As much water as you put on it, followed by some type of burn gel or burn cream. They recommend that you do not peel it off immediately, that you leave it on there to cool. And it's very important because it's only going to create more problems down the road if you do decide to peel that off. So if that answers your question.
Okay, we've got another one in the Q&A, and this is going to make Anthony really happy. We've heard about these things called mastics. Where do they fit in our operations?
Well, That's a good question. And we could probably spend an hour on it if we wanted to. But it's basically, and I try to keep it as simple as possible. We have crack sealing, and it's when we get beyond crack sealing, but not to the point where we need to pave a road or do a surface treatment. And it could be in conjunction with a surface treatment that we're making mastic repairs. So basically, when cracks become wider than 1.5 inches, we want to use mastic. When cracks become raveled, where we don't want to have squiggly lines down the center of the road, or the transverse cracks that start raveling on a road that become maybe 6 inches or 8 inches or 10 inches wide, and we don't want to put line after line after crack seal. Those are repairs from mastic. Now, if we have an alligator area that's 6 feet wide, that's 30 feet long, that's not an application for mastic. So I always tell people to use the rule of thumb. If it's to the point where we need to do some type of mill operation or surface treatment, then it's not ideal for mastic. If it's something we want to do in lieu of a surface treatment, preparing the road for that surface treatment or paving operation, that's a great application for mastic. But we don't want to replace mastic with crack sealing, because crack sealing is a more effective operation, cost-effective wise, for a roadway, and it should always be our first method of sealing a road is first, and then looking to mastic down the road as the road ages, and then potentially the surface treatments and all those types of options.
So this is a follow-on that's in the Q&A that fits really well. Why is it important to crack seal if you're just going to microsurface the road soon after?
I guess there probably could be two answers to the question.
And there'll be a third, because I've got a third.
Yeah. So crack sealing a road is important whenever you put a surface treatment down, if those cracks are there, because the odds of them showing back through eventually is going to happen. Whether it's a chip seal or a micro or anything, those cracks are eventually going to show through. Could be a year, could be 2 years, could be longer, but eventually they're going to come through in the same spot that they were. And the problem is did we seal them beforehand or did we not? Did we stop that water penetration from coming through? Things of those nature. So I always say it's ideal. You always want to do it.
Yeah, and I think Anthony did a good job covering that. But what's your goal with crack sealing? You want to keep water out. And if water is getting in, it's only going to make your problem worse. So when you're applying a thin surface layer like a micro or a chip seal or something else, then it is important that you block out the water from penetrating, because it's only going to make your top surface worse. So if you want to protect your investment, again, that's why we're crack sealing. And maybe you can piggyback on that, David.
And then the last thing is, sometimes when we're doing filling materials, we're giving a little bit of structural strength. The chip seal is not going to do that. So you want to use the right material for the right application in the right place. So I got a question here. Anybody else locally? They're pointing at each other. I won't put you on camera, but you got to ask the question.
How would I know that the crew that's caught crack seal certified? The superintendent want to make sure you get the best bang for your buck, and so I mean they have testing. Do they know that part?
That's a great question.
Yeah, there's many different levels of certifications, and one of the ones that our crack sealing crews now have are ISA certifications. You can have national certifications. So there's plenty of homework and research that you can do to make sure that your crew's coming in. Simple questions to ask: what type of certifications they have previously to them coming in, and making sure that they're an expert in the product. Because you're paying for something, you want to make sure that you're getting the right guy in there for the job.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of associations out there that these contractors belong to that provide training. We provide countless training at Craftco for contractors, and typically if they have our equipment, they're typically getting training from us just in the nature of having our equipment, like crack sealing. But there's associations that do training, just like Cornell Oka Roads. We're here today doing training, trying to educate you guys on crack sealing, being part of these associations and different activities that all help people be more educated on proper treatments and proper application and what to look for and what not to look for.
And if you're wondering, ISSA is the International Slurry Seal Association. And they do lots of training and they love to have people out. And you can actually get training from them relatively inexpensively. Question here in the Q&A in the Zoom. You have a pavement that's in really rough shape, but you did not have enough money to do the appropriate rehab. What are some good pavement repair or maintenance options to buy some additional service life? You want me to take that one, I bet. You're looking at me like that. Essentially, what do you do if you don't have the money to do what you really should be doing?
How bad's the road?
It depends. One of the things I was going to tell everybody, it depends on your particular case. It depends on the particular activities that you're dealing with. And I can tell you right now, better to do a less repairs well than to try to do a half repair that doesn't last. My favorite repair is the one we're all doing now, which is nothing. Sometimes it's better to do nothing than to do a bad repair that's not going to last. There's a lot of information in that pavement maintenance book focused on that very issue because we know budgets are tight and limited. One more question here locally. We have another one locally. Everybody's working about water. I do have one more in the Q&A, and then we're actually just about done anyway. If cracks turn into potholes, what are the best options to fix?
So there's a lot of different repairs for potholes. Crack sealing is not one of them. You should look into maybe a mastic product, or maybe a Duro patch, or maybe something else other than crack seal. Mastic seems to be a great option. It's used for spalding in larger areas, and it can be used in conjunction with crack seal. If you have a road that may only have potholes in it, but it's a great crack seal candidate, then both applications can be applied to that road. One of my recommendations would be mastic.
And then just so you know, if you have a pothole, if you're going to repair it, do me a favor, do it right. Roll over it with the back of your truck or a semi-permanent patch the dang thing and do it well. Any other questions? I don't see any more in the Q&A, and we're just about on the end of our time anyway. I'm going to see if this works here if I walk around. I think I lined it up well so I'm in film. So I want to thank everybody for coming out here. I definitely want to thank our two instructors. I'm going to speak a little bit more, Anthony Simone and Matt Wendt, who are representing LATA today with Gorman and Trafco, respectively. And we have other folks from their agencies who are out here taking pictures. That's it. And we also need to thank Megan and the other folks at LATA for helping set this up. And locally, if you wouldn't mind, everybody give a nice round to Gary for helping set this up. Now we are taking our morning break right now, half an hour. I'm going to drive up to the Wyndham Highway Garage. We're going to be doing the legal panel starting at the top of the hour. And everybody here, pull off, and we'll see you all at the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.